You've been watching President Donald Trump and his administration holding a press conference on IVF. The president is planning to expand IVF services to Americans struggling to begin families. We're going to be monitoring this event, and when the president speaks again or takes questions, we'll go back to him. Also today, breaking news, another possible indictment. This time, former ambassador and a former national security advisor to President Trump in his first term. His name, Ambassador John Bolton. You know him. He has appeared for years on every network discussing foreign policy. We're going to have more on this coming up. Plus, what worries Vice President J.D. Vance about artificial intelligence?
What I really worry about is the surveillance elements of AI, the defrauding elements of AI. That's the thing that we have to focus on. Kids being preyed on the internet by AI. That's what we have to focus on.
My complete interview with Vice President J.D. Vance is coming up. But first, he served President Trump, and then he became one of Trump's fiercest critics. And now he is facing the possibility of a federal indictment. According to various news outlets citing anonymous sources, and you know how I feel about anonymous sources, I'm not wild about them, but anyway, they are reporting former National Security Advisor John Bolton could be indicted very soon, and that very soon could be this afternoon. The Justice Department is reportedly asking a grand jury to return an indictment against Bolton. The issue? Bolton's handling of potentially classified documents. In August, the FBI searched Bolton's home and office. Then last month, the sealed FBI affidavit in support of that search warrant was unsealed. The affidavit says an investigation into possible Espionage Act violations. It also says Bolton's personal email was hacked by a foreign entity. Bolton has denied all the allegations. Former United States Attorney for the Northern District of Alabama, Jay Town, joins me. Jay, your thought about what news outlets are reporting, and these things leak, so it's probably pretty solid reporting that that they're going to ask for an indictment very soon. Asking for an indictment, does that necessarily mean that the prosecutor is going to get it from a grand jury?
No, it doesn't. Usually the prosecutors, when they do ask, though, they feel fairly comfortable with the ask. And so, as you say, it may be this afternoon that we learn that John Bolton, the former national security advisor to President Trump, has been indicted. A couple of thoughts. One, people need to understand that this investigation originated and began under the Biden administration, not the Trump administration. Secondly, EDVA has a leak problem. We saw this with the Comey indictment as well, that the declination letter's existence began, and the actual presentment to the grand jury of the indictment was made public well before we all knew when he was going to be indicted, almost to the hour. And that grand jury proceedings are secret for a reason. And this is twice now in a month or so that we've known about very high-profile indictments. And so I don't care who's doing the leaking. It shouldn't happen. It's against the law. It's also against the rules of court. And then finally, I'll say one more thing. Judge Lambert, there was a lot of the evidence that was collected, if you read the search warrant and the reporting, it involved Bolton's book and classified materials he may have retained to write it. And so the judge, there was a lawsuit over that book. Trump tried to stop him from publishing it. Bolton won, but the judge said to Bolton, and I quote, "Bolton has gambled with national security of the United States. He's exposed his country to harm and himself to civil and criminal liability." Well, here we are. Judge Lambert's words seem to be sort of prescient at the moment.
You know, I haven't seen the evidence. I haven't even seen an indictment. But as you might imagine, I've known John Bolton 25 years, just like I knew Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton, Joe Biden, former president, former vice president Mike Pence, and current President Donald Trump. All those names that I've given you were accused of mishandling classified documents, and in some cases indicted, some, which would be President Trump. The other ones, for some reason, were not indicted. But I must tell you, so knowing all these people, they may be sloppy, they may be arrogant, but I would bet my right arm on every single one of them from two different parties, having worked with them over the years, covering them, knowing everything about. I do not believe any one of them would sell out the United States. I just don't believe it. They may get mad at each other and say things, but I do not believe for 1 second, until proven otherwise, beyond a reasonable doubt, all those names, that any one of them would have done that. I mean, Clinton, Hillary Clinton, Joe Biden, Mike Pence, Donald Trump, and now John Bolton. And I know that's going to be unpopular, my thought, with a lot of people, but I just, boy, you got a lot to prove to me that John Bolton, beyond a reasonable doubt, did anything wrong with documents. He might have been sloppy, might have been mad, but not criminally.
And Greta, and to your point, I don't believe that the statutes, if he is indicted, will have any intent whatsoever. They're sort of strict liability statutes, whether it's 1924 or 793 CRE under the 18
Then they
U.S.C.
all
Code.
should have gone down. If that's the case, if it's just like, if intent is not an element of the crime, whatever it is, then every single one of the people I listed should have. It shouldn't be cherry picking. I mean, the fact that President Trump, that they cherry picked and went after Donald Trump was just a travesty because everyone before had gotten a pass.
So I think a lot of people are going to feel just like you do, Greta, and I'm fairly neutral on this. I'm perfectly happy to wait for whatever evidence there is or any harm that might have come to the United States as a result of his possession, if it's true, of any national defense information or classified materials. My understanding from the reporting is that the CIA did learn of a hack of Bolton's AOL account, and that led to some of the rapidity involved in the search warrant of his home and office. So maybe there was harm, and that might change the calculus a bit for this Department of Justice.
Then we should dial back to Huma Abedin when her ex-husband had documents on his computer that apparently were from Huma Abedin, who was the chief of staff, or not chief of staff, but a high-ranking member of Secretary of State Hillary Clinton's team. I mean, the problem is that first of all, classified documents in this town has really gotten to the point of being silly. Everything's classified. You don't want the people to hear, to know about it, stamp classified, and that's it. But, the things, or you wait 3 days and you read about it in the newspaper because there's so many leaks. But the problem is that if you don't like the person, and John Bolton is very prickly. I mean, a lot of people don't like him. I do not believe, like I say, a huge hurdle with me to say that he did this intentionally, or that he would ever do anything to harm this country. And the same for all of them, including President Donald Trump.
Yeah, I think that maybe people in the Department of Justice would agree with everything that you just said, Greta. And so that's what, again, he's presumed innocent. I think we do wait for the evidence to come out. We'll know a little bit more as filings, if he is indicted, are made by both sides about what the evidence is. I understand that you know his lawyer, Abby Lowell, very well, and he's a very competent attorney. People might remember he represented Hunter Biden, but he's represented scores of people.
He also represented Jared Kushner, Ivanka Trump.
Sure.
I mean, he's a lawyer's lawyer. He represented both sides of the aisle in this city.
Yeah, no, he's a very competent lawyer, and so I'm sure he'll make it clear to all of us what his client did or did not do, and DOJ will have the opportunity to say. It is, to your point, though, your greater point, there is an overclassification in Washington, D.C. for certain. And then also the inconsistencies that both sides frankly can point to of people being prosecuted for this stuff. Remember, this started under Obama. It's finishing under Trump. But I do think the American people and the justice system, they at least deserve some explanation as to why this person was prosecuted and this person was not. I find that to be fair, and it certainly builds that trust and confidence that we need in our justice system writ large.
Well, I'd be a perfect juror for this case because I certainly can presume John Bolton not guilty. Anyway, I presume him innocent.
You'd be struck immediately.
But he hasn't even been
Greta.
indicted. Yeah. We're standing by for the indictment that hasn't happened. Maybe he won't even be indicted. J-Town, thank you.
Right. Thank you, Greta.
Coming up, my complete interview with Vice President J.D. Vance. That one, the record continues.
From the moment Israel launched Operation Rising Lion, Newsmax was there.
We have some major breaking news. Israel launches strikes, preemptive strikes, almost 4 in the morning.
Israel has decided enough's enough.
What happened tonight was inevitable.
Well, something just caught my attention it sounds like afterburners overhead.
Reporting multiple explosions across the capital, Tehran.
I'm in a shelter now. There's 6 of us.
Benjamin Netanyahu has come out to make a statement.
Our fight is not with you. Our fight is with the brutal dictatorship We have risen like lions to defend ourselves.
Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon.
Whenever the biggest news breaks, Newsmax is there for you because we're real news for real people.
Douglas trusts Prevagen for his brain, and this is his story.
I'm Douglas, and I'm from Chicago. I was looking for something specifically for my brain. That's when I chose Prevagen. And the confidence I've received from Prevagen allows me to continue to do those things that I love. I have been taking Prevagen for more than 9 years, and it really works for me.
Prevagen has been the #1 selling brain supplement nationwide for over 10 years.
At Lumber Liquidators, we have the best prices on flooring, and we guarantee it. Find a lower price, we will beat it with our best price guarantee. We have over 200 stores nationwide. Find yours at lumberliquidators.com. Tell them Tom sent you.
When I first decided to invest in gold, I was a bit nervous and unsure how to start. Luckily, I found Noble Gold Investments. From the very first call, they made investing easy. No pushy sales tactics, no gimmicks, and no confusing free silver offers with hidden fees. Just honest advice tailored to my needs, giving me confidence every step of the way. If you're new to gold investing or want a partner you can trust, visit noblegoldinvestments.com.
Another face-to-face meeting is in the works between whom? President Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin. Earlier today, the two world leaders were on the telephone with each other discussing the ongoing war in Ukraine. President Trump says the call was a, quote, very productive one. President Trump added, President Putin congratulated me and the United States on the great accomplishment of peace in the Middle East, something that has been dreamed of for centuries. I actually believe that the success in the Middle East will help in our negotiation in attaining an end to the war with Russia and Ukraine. President Putin thanked the First Lady Melania for her involvement with children. He was very appreciative and said that this will continue. We also spent a great deal of time talking about trade between Russia and the United States when the war with Ukraine is over. Now, at the conclusion of the call, they agreed that there will be a meeting of their high-level advisors next week. The United States initial meetings will be led by Secretary of State Marco Rubio, together with various other people to be designated. A meeting location is to be determined. President Putin and I will then meet in an agreed-upon location, Budapest, Hungary, to see if we can bring this inglorious war between Russia and Ukraine to an end, end quote. Now, the phone call occurred one day before a big meeting. That big meeting is tomorrow. It's at the White House. Who is President Trump's guest? Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky. Earlier today, I spoke with Vice President J.D. Vance. I asked him if he thinks President Trump could secure a peace deal between Russia and Ukraine similar to the deal he brokered between Israel and Hamas. Here's that interview. Mr. Vice President, nice to see you, sir.
Good to see you. Thanks for having me.
I haven't spoken to you since the convention back in July of 2024.
A crazy week. I remember it well.
Very unusual week, indeed it was. Lots going on. Big week for the administration. Sure. President Trump sealing the deal with Israel and Gaza. No other president was able to do that. And it's been going on since 1948. So what is it? Is it his policy or his personality? Or why was he able to do that?
I think it's both. And I also think it's his frankly unorthodox way of doing diplomacy. I mean, so much has failed. And the president said, we're not going to do the same stuff that's been tried for 50, 60, 70 years that's failed. We're going to try something different. And it's a lot, Greta. I mean, it's hard to really encapsulate what made this moment possible. I think part of it, of course, is that the Israelis sort of reached a point where they felt like there was an opportunity. But I think most importantly is the president earned the trust of both our Israeli friends, but also a lot of our friends in the Gulf Arab states. And they were able to apply pressure to Hamas. Meanwhile, he was willing to actually work with the Israelis and figure out what were their go zones, what were their no-go zones. And importantly, we had two diplomats, Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff, who are not traditional State Department apparatchiks, right? These are not career bureaucrats from Washington, D.C. These are private sector people who know how to strike a deal. And he really empowered them in the final minutes, the final hours to get it done. I remember, Greta, that the president was actually doing a Law and Order roundtable when I got a call from Jared and said, hey, we have a question. We need to get it to the president. And of course, the president was in this roundtable. And this was the famous moment where Marco sort of whispers something in the president's ear and has, you know, the note card effectively saying we're right on the 1 yard line of getting this deal done. And just being involved in that, you realize that it's the president's constant almost obsessive focus on getting the deal done. Identify the issues, work through the issues, and get the deal done. And that's why we are where we are. And of course, now we're going to have to work to make sure that the deal sticks.
What do you think about the fact, I look at the polls in Israel, and Prime Minister Netanyahu, I've interviewed more than a dozen times over my career, is that he is not high in his polls among the Israelis. He won the war, and it's almost Churchill-like in that Churchill won World War II, and then afterwards he got, basically, people didn't want him.
Sure. I don't know Israel well enough to know what, the Prime Minister's poll numbers are, what they are. I think part of it is he's been around for 30 years, right? And eventually Democratic publics just, they get to a point where maybe they want something new, maybe they want something fresh, but that's purely a guess. I have no idea. I think that clearly we are at this moment because the President of the United States worked very hard to make it happen, and we worked with our Israeli friends to make it happen too. And both Prime Minister Netanyahu, his entire cabinet, but also, frankly, a lot of the Gulf Arab states were really a critical piece in making this happen. Of course, Qatar helped. The Turks helped, the Egyptians helped, and even some nations that are not in the Arabian world but are Muslim majority nations like Indonesia, they were a big part of this too. So it took all shapes and sizes. I'm sure that every single one of those countries, their leaders have their own domestic problems, their own domestic, upsides and benefits. But the President of the United States was willing to work with anybody, and that's why the deal got done.
Can you export to the Russia-Ukraine war the strategy that ended this war? Or are those just two completely different wars? Because I see them a lot similar. Hamas invaded, basically, Israel, killing 1,300. And Russia invaded Ukraine either 2014 or 2022, depending on when you say the war started.
I think that the thing that actually works in both cases is the Trump approach to diplomacy, which is energetic, that empowers his people on the ground, that actually encourages them to get a deal done, and is willing to explore some unconventional means in order to get the deal done. And look, we've made progress in the Russia-Ukraine war, Greta, that we wouldn't have made absent President Trump's leadership. But it turned out, as the president said, I think it surprised all of us, including the president, that this is a particularly tough nut to crack. And as much as energetic diplomacy from the President of the United States can get people to the 1 yard line, eventually you have to have the two parties who are willing to cut a deal. And right now, for all of our work, and we're going to keep on working at it, the Russians and the Ukrainians are just not at the point where they can make a deal. I do think that we will eventually get there, but it's going to take a lot more work because I think as we learned, the parties started so far apart. I think there's a fundamental misalignment of expectations. I'd say this in the Russia-Ukraine war, where the Russians tend to think that they're doing better on the battlefield than they actually are. And I think that's made it harder to strike a deal in these last couple of months, even though, again, we've made progress. I do think we're going to get to a deal, but we just got a little bit further to go.
Well, when you hear the president talk about the number of people who die every day, and he really, I know that it gets to him like it should anybody.
It does.
But on Wednesday, he struck a deal with India. They're going to stop buying oil and gas from Russia.
Yep.
And I think it's about 35% of the export of Russia. But it's not going to be overnight. But, are sanctions enough pressure, cutting off their oil and gas business? Is that enough to get Putin to the table?
Yeah, I think you have to separate sanctions from tariffs, because I think what we found is that tariffs have been quite effective as a negotiating tool with the Russians. But sanctions have been tried for decades in this particular region of the world.
And all over the world.
And all over the world. And I don't think they actually work particularly well. In fact, I think you can make an argument that in some cases, not all, of course, but in some cases, sanctions cause a lot of damage to the American economy and don't actually get the result that we want them to get, which is why the president has been very deliberate. He hasn't, he doesn't just apply blanket sanctions. He actually talks to the parties. He tries to understand what are the pressure points, what are they sensitive about. With the Russian case in particular, of course, a main driver of their economy is the oil that they sell to India and China. So he's been working with both India and China to try to cut down on those oil sales, and again, in order to apply some pressure to the parties in the region to get peace. But we're going to keep on doing that. The president's going to keep on aggressively working on it. There have been multiple times where people in the administration, from staff all the way up to cabinet secretaries, including me, by the way, have said, this thing is just never going to get finished. These guys are never going to make a deal. And the president says, we're going to keep on working at it. And
well, that's what everybody said about Israel. That's what everybody said about Israel.
That's what everybody said about Israel, and the president said we're going to keep on working at it. Yes, it's frustrating sometimes. Yes, he gets impatient with everybody involved sometimes. But eventually, so long as you keep working on it, I think the president has great confidence he can strike a deal. I think that he will. It's just a question of how long it's going to take.
All right, let me now bring it back to the United States. Domestic issues. I think probably the primary issue that every American cares about: health care, access to health care.
Yep.
Obamacare has not worked for a lot of people. Do you have, or does the administration have a plan? Because now the wars are at least hopefully getting behind us.
Sure. We do have a plan, actually, and one of the things that the Obamacare system did is that it really broke the insurance regulations in this country. I mean, so many people, if you go back to that early implementation period of Obamacare, even people who had really good health care, they saw their health care bills skyrocket by 100, 200, even 300%. You remember the famous promise, if you like your doctor, you can keep your doctor. A lot of people found because of the Obamacare regulations, they couldn't keep the doctor that they had built a relationship with over years. We want to fix that program, that process. And we also want to make sure that people can access affordable health care, because the great promise of Obamacare is that it would slow the increased costs of health care. It completely failed on that metric too. So we do have some things that we're working on. We've actually extended an olive branch to Democrats and said, if you guys want to come and have a conversation about how to fix this system, we'll certainly sit down and talk with you.
Is there a fix? Is there a fix?
I think there are things that you can do to make it better. I think the system, to pretend that we can fix such a complicated system, that logic is probably what led to the original Obamacare disaster. But I think that we can actually make the regulatory system of the insurance marketplaces work better. We can use reinsurance to make it more affordable for people with pre-existing conditions to get access to health care. And we can also make it easier for, look, if you're, let's say, a 30-year-old man who's completely healthy, you're going to want a different insurance product than a 65-year-old with some pre-existing conditions. I think that if we allow people to get the kind of health care plan that suits them, it'll actually lower costs. It'll get more people into the insurance system, which lowers costs for everybody, but it also make it so that people actually access good care. It is broken. The system was broken. We inherited a very broken system, and we do have some good ideas for how to address it.
Well, it's built into those a horrible inequity. Like I just had back surgery, and I had spectacular back surgery. I was back at work in 5 days because I could afford it. I had insurance, but I run into people my whole life, saying, "Oh, my back hurts, my back hurts." I know they can't have what I have.
Sure. Well, that is a big problem in American healthcare, is that actually American healthcare, if you can afford at the high end, is really, really good healthcare. But unfortunately, a lot of people at the low end, a lot of people who are in the Medicaid program, they're really suffering because the healthcare isn't very good. And that's one of the things that we would like to fix and we would like to address. Unfortunately, as you know, any big healthcare policy, it requires Democrats in this town because, Democrats have a filibuster-proof margin in the Senate. Even if you had all 53 Republicans who would support a health care program, you would need 7 Democrats to get on board. So we're going to actually force the Democrats to work with us and to actually enact some policy. And this is what's been so crazy, Greta, about being in this town for the last 8 months. The Democrats' entire obsession is fight Trump, get Trump, attack Trump. When they get the majority, if they ever get the majority, they're going to try to impeach Trump. And we know that, and that's their sole focus and their obsession. We would actually like to work with the Democrats on fixing health care for the American people. Unfortunately, we haven't found much willingness across the aisle to do that.
All right. Artificial intelligence, which is really going to be a problem for your younger and your generation as well as for your children. Is it a friend or is it a foe? Is it going to help the economy? Is it going to lose jobs, make opportunity? I went on it yesterday before I did this interview, and I said, give me some advice from my interview with Vice President. Vice President said,
what did it tell you?
No, this upsets me. It says, keep it punchy. He will get offensive quick. First of all, it's a grammatical error. It should be quickly. But why? Is it you get such? What an insulting thing to write. He'll get,
I'll get offensive quick. I don't even know what that
quickly.
means,
I don't either. But that's my point. Is that artificial intelligence? It's supposed to be the panacea. Yet if it spits out stupid stuff like this, that's not helpful, and people are reading it, You know, where are we going with artificial intelligence, and what about the jobs that are going?
Yeah, so artificial intelligence is still in many cases very dumb. And I think that you asked, is it good or is it bad or is it going to help us or is it going to hurt us? The answer is probably both. And we should be trying to maximize as much of the good and minimize as much of the bad. Let me give you a very concrete example. So two artificial intelligence headlines that I've read in just the last week is one, researchers used AI to identify a new cancer drug pathway that nobody had ever come up with, and they're actually starting to see some evidence that that could be a credible and a promising way to treat certain types of cancer. So that's great. That's what we want artificial intelligence to do, is to unlock new therapeutics so that people can live longer, healthier lives. At the same time, I saw an announcement, I think it was from Sam Altman of OpenAI, who said that basically they're going to start using AI to introduce erotica and porn and things like that. And if AI is helping us find new cures for new diseases, that's great. If it's helping us come up with increasingly weird porn, that's bad. And I think that we actually need policymakers here. And this is where, me and the president have been so focused on this issue. We want to lean in as much to the socially positive applications of artificial intelligence. But look, we know AI is going to be used by hackers. It's going to be used to defraud the banking system. It's going to be used to prey, especially on elderly people who sometimes won't be able to tell the difference between their granddaughter's voice and an artificially intelligence generated voice. That's a main vector for fraud. That's one of these ways that people are getting defrauded. And by the way, to everybody out there, if you get a call from your granddaughter saying, I need help, send $1,000 to this account number, you should hang up the phone and call your granddaughter back and make sure that was actually her who called you. That's terrible. Because we're seeing that fraud used by artificial intelligence. So it's going to be a mix. Like any technology, there are positive and negative.
But are we getting ready for it? Because the thing I go to the grocery store, and it used to be that there was someone at the gate who would take my ticket after I parked. Now it's all automated, which isn't AI, but it's automation.
Sure.
And you see so many of these low-level jobs just vanishing. And it's not going to hurt you or me, but it's going to hurt a lot of people.
So I think automation is usually good. And if you look historically, for example, when the automated teller machine came out, the ATM came out, there were a lot of people who said that would destroy jobs in the banking sector. You actually have more jobs in the banking sector. Now, they're doing something a little bit different, because if you need cash, you still go to an ATM. But we actually have more jobs, more people working in the retail banking sector than we did before the ATM machine was invented. So I'm actually optimistic that that automation actually leads to higher productivity, higher wages. That's good for people. What I really worry about is the surveillance elements of AI, the defrauding elements of AI. That's the thing that we have to focus on. Kids being preyed on the internet by AI. That's what we have to focus on. And we have to try to harness the technology for the good, for curing diseases, and try to ensure that it's not being used to prey on our kids.
And of course, AI, some kids are using it to write papers, and I used to just copy all the world books. There's a little change. Times have changed. Anyway.
It's much different.
Much different. Mr. Vice President, thank you for talking to me, too.
Thanks, Greta.
We're going to take you back to the White House. President Trump is now taking questions from the press.
I ended 8 of them. It's going to be 9. I think we're going to have this one done hopefully soon. But I'll be meeting him probably over the next 2 weeks. First, Marco is going to be meeting. And the vice president, as you know, is very much involved. The whole team is involved. Steve Witkoff will be involved. Yeah, please.
What did you tell them about the Tomahawks? Did you discuss the Tomahawk missiles? Did you discuss?
Well, we talked about it a little bit. Didn't say much, but I do say to you, we need Tomahawks for the United States of America, too. We have a lot of them, but we need them. I mean, we can't deplete for our country. So, they're very vital. They're very powerful. They're very accurate. They're very good, but we need them, too. So I don't know what we can do about that.
Why do you think a second meeting with Putin now will yield different results?
Well, I think Alaska actually set a stage, and that wasn't very long ago, but it set a stage. You have to understand, I came into this situation. I didn't start this war. This is a Biden deal. And I came into it, and it was a mess. It could have led to World War III. In my opinion, this could have led to World War III. That won't happen, but it could have. So I came in, this war was raging. When I left, this wasn't even a thought. For 4 years, nobody talked about it. I spoke to President Putin about Ukraine. It was the apple of his eye, but there was never going to be doing anything like this. And this all went because of some really bad decisions that were made. And look what you have. You have millions of people dead. You have just a horrible, horrible situation. I'm doing it to save souls. That's all I'm doing it for. I'm not doing it for us. We have an ocean between us. I'm doing it also to help Europe. They want to have it ended, but they're unable to do it. I'm able to do it. So I think we'll be successful. We'll save a lot of lives. It should have been done. Should have never started. This would have never happened if the election weren't rigged. This would have never happened. But it did happen, and I'll get it stopped. Okay? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, you mentioned a $1,300 drug at the top of this. Were you referring to the weight loss drugs?
Yeah, I was referring to Ozempic or I was heard the fat loss drug.
So those are going to be $150 out of pocket for Americans.
They'll be much lower. They'll be much lower. Yeah, go ahead, please.
We have not negotiated those yet. We're going to be rolling these out over time. The GLP category of drugs, which includes Ozempic, have not been negotiated yet.
What's the timeline for that?
But it will. It'll come down, like everyone else.
Okay. Any timeline on those negotiations?
No, but I think those are going to come down pretty fast, and we do have, I guess, some alternatives.
The president will be happy with the result, and until he is, we're not going to close those negotiations. Thank you.
Except it'll happen.
Got it.
Mr. President, what's your message to pro-life conservatives? Some pro-life conservatives have religious objections to IVF and are already critical of this policy. What's your message to them?
I don't know about the views of that. I'm just looking to do something because, pro-life, I think this is very pro-life. You can't get more pro-life than this. Please.
Mr. President, you've been talking about how this new benefit plan will also include root cause treatments for infertility. How will you make sure that those root cause treatments are equally accessible to IVF?
Well, I think we're going to be doing that. Would anybody like to talk about that subject?
I'll comment
Please.
on the rulemaking process. I think it's the determination, again, Secretary of Labor, the determination, the Department of Labor is issuing their intent today to open up the rulemaking process, again, for more flexibility. Anytime that you have a president who's leading when you can offer more access to health care at a lower rate is a benefit to the American people and to the end user, and that's exactly what he's doing. And so you heard before that through the Q&A guidance that was issued today with the other agencies, that will give guidance to our employers and the employees about what the flexibility of that is, and then again opening that rulemaking process for further determination of the access that can be had offered in those benefits for all different types of health care access is the goal of the Department of Labor.
Good answer.
Thank you.
I like this better. I just say they can do better than me. Yeah, please. Good job, Larry. You're doing a fantastic job.
Thank you, Mr. President.
I shouldn't tell. I won't say it. That I will not say that she was recommended by the Teamsters. Can you believe it? And she's turned out to be a gem, an absolute gem. You're doing a great job. Thank you very much.
Mr. President, John Bolton was just
Do
indicted.
you think we can see your deal-making skills applied to the government shutdown anytime soon?
Well, look, all we want to do is just extend. We don't want anything. We just want to extend, live with the deal that they had. They want to spend $1.5 trillion on illegal immigrants, and they want to destroy health care for everyone else. And it's crazy. It's crazy. People that are here illegally, they want to spend $1.5 trillion. So we're just not going to do it. No, we have to take care of our health care. Now, we're doing that today, and we're doing it with, favored nations, the most favored nations. Your costs are going to be dropping greatly. And I'm really I'm really happy that it's at the beginning of my administration because I did insulin and got it down to like $25, but it doesn't kick in. It didn't kick in for 2 years by statute, so it couldn't kick in. And I said, boy, I hope I win this election because if I don't, somebody else is going to take credit for it, Bobby. And sure as can be, Biden said, he didn't even know what the hell was happening, and it was a hard thing for me to do. I got insulin way down. What was it before that? It was just massive. It was impossible to afford. And sure as can be, because it was statute, it couldn't have been earlier. I said, boy, this falls into the next administration. I better win. And all of a sudden, I watched this Biden taking credit for something that I did. And on other things, too. We had a lot of things kick in. So the nice part about this is at the beginning of our administration, so I think we're going to see the fruits of our labor. And I hope on our other situation that we've talked so much about, autism, I hope we're going to see some very good results based on the recommendations that we made, and we have time to watch those results now.
Gold was just indicted by a grand jury in Maryland. Do you have a reaction to that?
I didn't know that. You told me for the first time, but I think he's a bad person. I think he's a bad guy. Yeah, he's a bad guy. It's too bad, but it's the way it goes.
The case against him?
That's the way it goes, right? That's the way it goes. Will I what?
Have you reviewed the case against him?
No, I haven't. But I just think he's a bad person. Okay, anybody else?
What's the timeline for the IVF drug through the National Commissioner Priority Review Voucher, Dr. McCary?
What do you think, Doctor?
So, first of all, the National Priority Voucher Program says we're going to proactively at the FDA look for amazing treatments like this IVF treatment. We're going to reach out to the companies, and if it's in line with the president's national priorities, we're going to put those drugs at the front of the line and get a decision out in weeks instead of a year. And so today we announced 9 drugs that are going to be recipients. These are products where the manufacturing is going to be in the United States, or it's meeting a large unmet public health need, like a diabetes drug we announced today, or it is a product where you're going to see an affordability phenomena because the prices are getting equalized in line with the president's most favored nation status goal.
Wow, that's great. Why didn't I have him speak? He was so could have saved a lot of time. That's funny. I'm not surprised. Yeah, please.
Yes, thank you, President. So Senate Majority Leader John Thune today said he'd like to proceed with the bill which would put sanctions on Russia. What's your thought on that?
Well, we're going to see. He doesn't know about the call yet. I'm going to speak to him later. And it was subject to what I wanted to do. And so we'll see what happens. This may be such a productive call that we're going to end up, we want to get peace. We want to stop the killing. 7,000 people a week. Can you believe it? We want to stop the killing. So I'm going to speak to him and the speaker, Mike Johnson. I'll speak to them a little bit later, and I'll tell them about this, and we'll make the right determination. I'm not against anything. I'm just saying it may not be perfect timing. It could happen in a week or two, but it's at my option, as you know.
Right, but did President Putin try to dissuade you from selling Tomahawk missiles?
Well, of course. What do you think he's going to say? Please sell Tomahawks?
No, but did he give any
Is he going to say, please sell those Tomahawks? I really appreciate it. I did actually say, would you mind if I gave a couple of thousand Tomahawks to your opposition? I did say that to him. I said it just that way. He didn't like the idea. He really didn't like the idea. No, I said it that way. You have to be a little bit lighthearted sometimes, but no, he doesn't want Tomahawk. Tomahawk is a vicious weapon. It's a vicious, offensive, incredibly destructive weapon. Nobody wants Tomahawk shot at him.
Specifically ask you not to provide Tomahawks?
So, wouldn't anybody? I mean, it's been in the news. Who wouldn't do that? CNN. Who wouldn't do that? You know? Do you think he's going to say, I'd love to have Tomahawk sent my way? I don't think so. Maria, we have one of the great stars of television here, and she's an incredible person, and she's just an amazing woman who she got it all right. She got the Russia hoax right. She got everything. Would you have a question?
Yes, Mr. President. I would ask you why this was so important to you, IVF, and why was autism so important to you? What are you trying to achieve?
Well, autism is like a whole different thing. When you look at, it was 1 in 20,000. Now it's 1 in 12. If you look, Bobby, we have different numbers, but 1 in 12, 1 in 28, 1 in 32. There's a couple of different numbers out there, but it's 1 in a very, very different number than it used to be. It used to be 1 in 20,000. And that was not that long ago, 20 years ago or so. And now they had something for boys, for babies, baby boys. It's 1 in 12. I heard 1 in 10, Bobby. I heard another one, different lists. But when you think of that, it's not even sustainable, but there's something artificial. When that happens, that's not like a natural. And then you have certain groups of people that literally don't have autism, and they're not taking some of the things that we're taking. So we're working very hard. And on IVF, it's just that I have friends, including Katie, that called me and they told me the importance of it. I wasn't that familiar with it. Now I think I've sort of become the father ever since I heard. There was a bad decision in Alabama where a judge wanted all clinics to be immediately closed, right? And Katie called up and you said you were pretty strongly attacked by your friends that you didn't even know were involved with IVF, right?
You had people that had grandkids, people who'd gone through IVF themselves telling their story. And
Yeah.
saying there are people that cope later.
Tell what you did when you heard from your friends. You said this was not, they almost became violent. Right?
Yeah, I told him, I said, Mr. President, we need you. We need your voice in this conversation. We need the directive. We need the strong support because there are millions of people out there, moms and dads, wanting to bring life into the world. And you had people, the chilling effect that occurred across Alabama, there were people that were in the middle of that process that had been praying to have a child, and that was halted. And so the reality of that was very stark in our state. And so I was able to tell the president some of the stories of people, friends and grandparents and relatives that told me what they had experienced and also, what they were fearful of in the future. And the president very quickly acted, spoke with a strong voice, and really led the way. Obviously, we saw Democrats continue to fearmonger for the remainder of the year, trying to use it as an election issue when actually IVF is legal and accessible in all 50 states. And President Trump very clearly said where he was on this. And he said, I'm going to make sure that this is more accessible and that it is more affordable for families coast to coast. That's exactly what he did, but it's that real life, there's real life stories, sir, that he responded to. And that's what people don't know about him. He cares. And when you tell him what American people are dealing with, he wants to do something about it. You have leaders and politicians that come before him that want to talk about things. President Trump wants to actually make things happen. That's exactly what he did here, and I'm so grateful, Mr. President.
Thank you, Katie, very much. Appreciate it. So we will go back to what we're doing, working again with Marco and with JD and a few other people on the war, and we're doing a lot of other things also. The economy is unbelievable. It really is. It's been incredible. And I think one of the great numbers that I've ever heard, think of it, over $17 trillion being invested in our country. And when you think of compare that to the last administration, but really compare it to any administration, compare it to any country. There's never been a country with anything like that. That's in a period of 8 months. And we've already broken every record possible. There's never anything even close. So we'll go back to all of that. Prices are down. Oil is down. We're down $58 a barrel. We're going to be hitting $2 for gasoline. I think we're going to be at $2. And the previous administration, they were at $4 and $5. They were going up much higher. And then they swung back into my things, but they didn't swing back properly. They were very, very late. They really blew it. We had it really going in the right direction. They came and took everything out. And it's incredible. I'll never forget. They lost control of the price of gasoline, of oil. They totally lost control, Howard. And then they went back immediately. Well, let's go back to Trump. But by that time, it was too late. And they didn't go back because the leases and everything else, they didn't do what they had to do. They wouldn't know. They really didn't know how to. But we could be hitting close to $2 a gallon. I'd love to break it if we could, but we could be. And when that comes down, everything else has been coming down. Groceries are down. The price of things are down. And honestly, the simplicity is if you can get oil down, it's such a big category, everything follows. So just about everything follows. And we are working on beef, and I think we have a deal on beef that's going to bring the price of beef. That would be the one product that we would say is a little bit higher than we want it, maybe higher than we want it, and that's going to be coming down pretty soon, too. We did something. We worked our magic. But groceries are down, and energy is down. Electricity is way down. We have the prices coming down for people. They were abused for 4 years by the Biden administration. Thank you very much, everybody. We'll see you soon. Thank you. Thank you.
You've been watching President Trump do what he does almost every day. He takes questions from reporters, including a question on this breaking news that we are following. Former National Security Advisor John Bolton has now been indicted. I want to bring back former U.S. Attorney for the Northern District of Alabama, Jay Town. Jay, now news organization, since I've been on air, reporting that he has been indicted, and I assume that it's in Maryland jurisdiction. That's where he lives. Your thoughts?
Yeah, as we were discussing, typically it is not presented to the grand jury unless the prosecutors, in this case, I believe you're correct, the District of Maryland, not EDBA, that it is likely he would be indicted. He was. I'm sure that what we will see, Greta, is there will be a 1 or 2 count indictment for the possession of either classified materials or possession of materials containing national defense information. We saw similar charges against President Trump filed. It's important to remember this investigation started under President Biden's DOJ and has continued until to the fore. So, but we all need to wait and see what the evidence is.
That's sort of interesting to say it began under President Biden. Apparently, they didn't elect to put it before the grand jury, which is, and this administration did elect to put it before a grand jury. And for those who are not particularly familiar with the D.C. area, is that from where I'm sitting, I can practically throw a stone to Maryland, same as with the Eastern District of Virginia that you mentioned. The Eastern District of Virginia is one jurisdiction, Washington, D.C. is another, and Maryland's another. But Maryland does mirror the demographics that we have here in the Washington, D.C. It's probably a very liberal jury pool. And of course, we're going to have to wait and see what the evidence is, but you can indict, that's all he said, a prosecutor can indict a ham sandwich. Is that true, Jay?
It really is. It's not. People have to understand the grand jury process. It's not adversarial. There's no evidence presented that is exculpatory on behalf of the would-be defendant or the target of the investigation. It's a one-sided argument. So it's not terribly difficult to. I've indicted well over 10,000 defendants in my career as an attorney, as a career prosecutor.
I thought you were going to say ham sandwiches. I thought you were going to say ham sandwiches.
No, we might have. Yeah, given the jury ham sandwiches. We didn't give them ice cream like they do down in Georgia, Fannie Willis country.
Right.
But Greta, I'm with you on waiting to see what the evidence is, seeing what Abbe Lowell's response is on behalf of his client, John Bolton, and really the DOJ's response too. I mean, these are serious charges, and if he was in possession of these materials, the proofs are not particularly difficult.
And you have to, and one other thing you're saying is that, this is, as you noted, it's one side, and I want to say this for all indictments that we discuss on TV, on this network, I've been saying it for 30 years, is that not only is it one-sided, but the standard to indict is not beyond a reasonable doubt. It's untested evidence in one direction only, the prosecution, and the standard is so very low.
Yeah, and when we start to hear about the evidence, I want folks at home to understand that, if you're in a meeting and it's a classified meeting, what we call a high-side meeting, and you take notes or you go home and take notes about that meeting, those notes become classified as well. And so I want folks to understand it's not just going to be those sort of red and white bordered folders marked top secret that perhaps we might see in this case, but it might just literally be notes handwritten by John Bolton. But and then you got to marry that up with the classified materials themselves. So this might be a difficult case for DOJ to prove for that reason alone.
And with that, we'll have to wait to see what the evidence is, as well as read the indictment, see what the exact charges are. Jay Town, as always, thank you.
Thank you, Greta.
Coming up, Congresswoman Nancy Pelosi snaps at a reporter. That video when the record continues.
A return to greatness with you at Trump Tower. Patriot Gold Group is the only gold company with this access.
It's about relationships and loyalty, conservative values and commitment.
Patriots protecting patriots since 2016. Over $1 billion in transactions and home of the no fee for life IRA.
Hey, I'm not just a spokesman, I'm a client since the very beginning.
Give Patriot Gold Group a call at 1-800-778-4156.
Patriot Gold Group is Consumer Affairs' top-rated gold and silver dealer nationwide. The only firm nationwide where you, the client, work directly with an owner. Home of the no fee for life IRA. See how easy it is to protect your IRA with physical gold and silver.
Call now
1-800-778-4156.
I am Mr. H, owner of Immuno 150, possibly the most complete and best nutritional supplement in the world, bar none. Now, it has propelled me to 91 years of age, and my wife Shirley to 82. Both of us are still cutting a wide swath in life, doing everything we did many years ago. All because of Immuno 150, and it can do the very same thing for you. Try it for 90 days so you can experience the difference it can make in your life. Nothing on the market can compete with the way we blend 70 plant-derived colloidal minerals with 80 very carefully selected nutrients. You'll be surprised if you take the recommended dose of Immuno 150 for 3 months. Place your order now so that you can be with us many years from now. Thank you and God bless.
Hello, I'm Franklin Graham. Have you been running through life? Who can save you? You can't save yourself, but Jesus can. You see, our sins separate us from God. Our sins are a stench in the nostrils of God. But God loves us and sent his Son on a rescue mission to save us. Jesus Christ came from heaven to this earth to save us from our sins. He took our sins to the cross. He shed his own blood. He died for our sins, and God raised him to life on the third day. He's not dead. He's alive, and he can come into your heart right now and forgive you. Just pray this prayer with me right now. Just say, God, I'm a sinner. I'm sorry for my sins. Forgive me. I do believe that Jesus is your Son, and I want to trust him as my Savior, and I want to follow him as my Lord from this day forward, forever. Amen. If you prayed that prayer, call that number right now that's on the screen.
Are you at all concerned about the new January 6th committee finding you liable for that day? Why did you refuse the National Guard on January 6th?
Shut up. I did not refuse the National Guard. The president didn't send it. Why are you coming here with Republican talking points as if you're a serious journalist?
The American people want to know. We still have questions.
Wow. Why was Congresswoman Nancy Pelosi so angry? Well, the reporter pressed the former House Speaker about her actions on January 6, 2021. Pelosi was denying claims that she delayed sending in the National Guard on that day. A spokesperson for Congresswoman Pelosi also issued a statement about that exchange with the reporter. Quote, numerous independent fact-checkers have confirmed again and again that Speaker Pelosi did not plan her own assassination on January 6th. The ongoing attempts to whitewash the deadly insurrection are shameful, unpatriotic, and pathetic, end quote. Meanwhile, House Republicans recently created a new subcommittee to investigate January 6th. This after the last Democrat-led committee found President Trump incited the riots. Meanwhile, today is day 16 of the government shutdown. Last night, Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders participated in a CNN town hall event with New York Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. During that event, Senator Sanders was asked about the shutdown. Here's that exchange.
How do you think this shutdown reflects on Chuck Schumer's leadership?
Well, I think it reflects more on Mike Johnson's leadership and President Trump's leadership. This is a leadership which said it's okay to give well, how do you feel? You tell me. Think it's a good idea to give $1 trillion in tax breaks to the richest people in the country and then make massive cuts to health care for working class people?
I think Chuck Schumer has voted for continuing resolutions 13 times in the last 4 years, and he has the opportunity to vote for one again, but he's refusing to come to the table.
I think, look, as I have said, there are 53 Republicans in the Senate, correct?
Yes.
They need 60. What does that mean? It means you have to talk to the other side. Mike Johnson is not talking. John Thune is not talking. President Trump is not talking. That is the problem.
Coming up, what small legs can do. That when the record continues.
It's true. I am an America First, liberty-loving Latino. That's why I know this country is worth fighting for. That's why the Chris Salcedo Show will always tell you the truth.
The Chris Salcedo Show, for the news you need to know.
When curiosity strikes about your family story, we're here with answers only your ancestors can provide. Right now, your whole story is on sale.
Talking to people today about their retirement accounts. Sir, excuse me.
Yeah.
Do you have a retirement account?
Yeah, I've got a TSP from my old government job.
How's that doing?
I'm forgetting about it. I can't contribute to it. There are fees to get the funds, and the investment options are limited, so the money's just stuck.
How about a gold IRA?
I can do that?
Absolutely. You can roll it into a gold IRA, and you have all the same tax advantages as a TSP, but with more flexibility. And you can put physical gold and silver in your retirement account.
I'm taking control with Noble Gold Investments.
Your retirement, your rules. Noble Gold.
Are you getting the most from your Medicare plan?
It's overwhelming, actually.
Really confusing. It was always a struggle for us trying to narrow it down.
With Matchfinder by eHealth, it's easy to see if you could get more coverage for less money. So we invited people to give it a try.
This is the first time I'll be able to see the major plans side by side.
Put your doctors in, put your prescriptions in.
I'd like to add a doctor. Oh, and there he is.
Yeah, that's a good deal right there.
I'm all about saving money.
See if you could get more for less with a new Medicare plan. Go to eHealth.com and try Matchfinder. Compare your current plan to new 2026 plans from the nation's top insurance companies. Enter your doctors and prescriptions and choose from plans ranked for you by cost, coverage, and satisfaction. Or call this number to compare plans with the help of an eHealth advisor. They're paid the same no matter which Medicare Advantage plan you choose.
Thanks for calling eHealth. How can I help you today?
One thing I'm looking for is lowering prescription costs.
Awesome. We can do this together. This looks like this is going to be pretty cost effective for your prescriptions. So you're saving money across the board while also increasing your benefits. What do you think?
All right, sounds good. Thank you. That was amazing. I mean, it's a great plan.
How was that?
It was easy.
And would you recommend this to other folks?
Heck yeah, if they're paying high prices like I am now. Well, let me tell you, go to these guys.
Call this number for your Medicare plan comparison or get started at eHealth.com. Either way, it's always a free service.
They weren't pushing just one plan. They're going to look for what's perfect for you.
It's going to save me close to about $400 or $500 a year.
The Matchfinder, that's the greatest idea I've seen in a long time.
The fact that it was free makes it a whole lot better.
Call 1-800-705-0863 to compare Medicare plans in your area or visit eHealth.com.
eHealth, your Medicare matchmaker.
How does the world's most trusted dog expert keep his own dogs so healthy?
Hi, I am Cesar Milan. In my 20 years rehabilitating dogs, I've seen too many struggle with health problems that no amount of training could fix. Then I discovered it wasn't the dog, it was their food. Fortunately, I found veterinarian Dr. Marty's Anti-Kibble Breakthrough.
Nature's Blend is packed with whole foods that are freeze-dried, locking in nutrients.
I saw remarkable improvements in my dogs within weeks.
Try Dr. Marty risk-free for 90 days. Plus, get a free gift when you call or visit drmartypets.com/Caesar.
Sponsored by Dr. Marty Nature's Blend, the health of fresh food with the convenience of kibble. Visit drmartypets.com/TV.
These little dogs graced a big stage in Munich, Germany. It was the International Dachshund Race. More than 100 dachshunds with their itty-bitty little legs ran against each other. When they took off, most had their eyes on the finish line, but of course some were just happy to run with other dogs and distracted their competitors. The track was about 130 feet long. The fastest pup covered that distance just 4.4 seconds. Those little legs sure can move fast. The race featured dogs smaller than 11 pounds. The Chris Salcedo Show is up next. Stay with Newsmax.